Black billionaire's husband, left her for a new wife. She cashed out and walked away, smiling. The roar of laughter from the backyard hit Madison Vaughn like a punch to the chest. She had only meant to drop off the signed documents, divorce papers, ironically printed on thick cream-colored paper like a wedding invitation. But when her chauffeur-driven Escalade turned the corner and stopped in front of the estate she once designed every inch of, the scene unfolding behind the floor-to-ceiling windows made her freeze. There he was, Julian Vaughn, her husband of 18 years. The man she'd built an empire with, shirtless, bronzed, and grinning by the pool, pouring champagne into the mouth of a woman who looked barely old enough to rent a car. The woman was wearing Madison's silk robe, the one Julian gave her for their 10th anniversary in the Maldives. She had long platinum blonde hair and tanned limbs that screamed Aspen money, not South Side hustle. The robe slipped off one shoulder as she laughed, toasting to a future she hadn't earned. Madison blinked. The man who used to massage her ankles during late-night budget meetings now massaged the new wife's shoulders. Her heart should have broken, but something in her had snapped shut instead, not in defeat, in clarity. She stepped out of the car, heels crunching softly against the stone driveway. The new security guard, a man she didn't recognize, moved to intercept her, but a glance, cool, composed, froze him in place. Madison didn't need to scream or make a scene. She walked into the house she had designed from scratch, past the foyer lined with art pieces she had personally curated from her South African travels, and stepped onto the patio like she still owned the damn place. Julian looked up, startled, mid-toast. His smile died on his lips. "Madison," he said, standing. "You weren't supposed to—" "I know," she said, voice steady, almost too calm. "I was just supposed to sign away my life and disappear. But lucky me, I left my pen." The blonde. Aubrey? Ashley? It didn't matter, wrapped the robe tighter around herself. Hi, I'm Serena." Madison looked her over with eyes that had once negotiated billion-dollar acquisition deals. "Of course you are." Julian tried to move toward her, hands raised in placation. "Let's talk inside." "I think I'd prefer here. I love what you've done with the place," she said, gaze drifting to the altered landscape. Her roses, gone. The pebbled path to the koi pond, paved over. "You erased me with impressive speed." Julian's jaw clenched. "It wasn't like that." "No?" Madison cocked her head. "Because the woman in my robe, sipping champagne out of my grandmother's flutes, certainly gives that impression." Serena looked ready to melt into the pool. "I didn't mean—" Madison cut her off without turning. "I'm not talking to you, sweetheart." Julian's tone shifted. "You agreed to the settlement." "No, Julian," Madison said, taking out a copy of the original agreement. "I agreed to this." Then she pulled out another, the altered version Julian had filed with the court, forged signature and all. She let them both fall to the glass table between them. Julian's color drained. "You think I didn't notice?" she asked, voice rising just enough to carry. "You thought while I was consulting with women-led startups in Nairobi, you could pull the oldest play in the book? Strip my name from the patents? Transfer properties into offshore trusts? Make me walk away with nothing but pearls and polite silence?" Julian didn't answer. He didn't have to. The guilt on his face spoke volumes. "Here's the twist, Jules," Madison said, eyes glittering. "I've been watching you. My legal team, better than yours. My tech team, smarter than yours. And while you were playing house with Malibu Barbie here, I was locking down your accounts." "What?" His voice cracked. Madison pulled out her phone and tapped a few keys. "Your accounts are frozen. The ones you opened in the Caymans, Belize, Dubai. Transferring marital assets without disclosure." That's fraud. Julian took a step forward, angry now. You think you're going to ruin me? Oh no, she said, eyes never leaving his. You already did that. I'm just going to make sure the world knows it. She turned to leave, but then paused and looked at Serena. If you're smart, she said coolly, you'll call your parents and tell them to come get you, this ride. It's over. As she walked away, the stillness behind her was satisfying, not silence. Shock. She could feel it, like air before a storm. Back in the car, her driver didn't say a word, but as he pulled away from the house, Madison let out the breath she had been holding since she saw them. She didn't cry. Instead, she tapped her screen again and opened her camera. A folder titled Plan B waited. Photos, documents, receipts, emails. Evidence. Madison Vaughn hadn't spent nearly 2 decades building her husband's legacy just to walk away empty-handed. She may have been erased, but she had come back with ink. And she was about to write a new ending, one where the black woman didn't get crushed. She cashed out and walked away smiling. 3 days after the poolside confrontation, Madison sat in the glass-walled office of her longtime financial advisor, Simone Harris. The Los Angeles skyline sprawled behind them, but Madison barely noticed the view. She was focused on the folders Simone had placed in front of her, each one tagged with a name, a bank, a dollar figure, or a company she technically no longer owned. Simone tapped the edge of one document. This trust here, Hawthorne Holdings. He set it up 8 months ago. You were still married. It's holding 6 commercial properties in San Diego, plus that vineyard in Sonoma. Madison arched an eyebrow. And let me guess, he claimed it was to diversify our portfolio. Simone gave a dry laugh. That's what his accountant told me when I started asking questions last week. But here's the thing, Maddie. Hawthorne Holdings was funded with capital transferred directly from Empire Row Ventures, your joint entity. Madison leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. So not only did he strip my name from our company, he used its assets to start a real estate trust under a shell name while we were still married. Exactly. And if we can prove he did it intentionally to hide marital assets before the divorce was finalized, that's felony-level fraud. Madison exhaled slowly, her mind racing. And what about the offshores? Simone slid over another folder. Frozen. As of this morning, your lawyer filed emergency motions in 3 jurisdictions. I've got a team tracing the rest of the money. Julian got sloppy, Maddie. He thought he'd already won. Madison's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Let him keep thinking that. Simone hesitated, then leaned forward. Can I ask you something? Why didn't you fight him sooner? You're 10 times the strategist he is. You could have dismantled him a year ago. Madison looked out the window for a moment. Because I loved him. I didn't want to believe he could do this to me. Even when I saw the signs, I kept thinking it was stress, that we'd find our way back. She turned back, her voice steady. But now I'm done. No more protecting him. No more being the quiet wife. That night, Madison returned to her penthouse suite at the Pacifica, the same building where half of Hollywood's A-list executives lived. She poured herself a glass of red wine and opened her laptop. Her inbox was full. Lawyers, forensic accountants, ex-employees of Empire Row who had reached out quietly after the news broke. But one email caught her eye. Subject: You don't know me, but I know her. Madison clicked, expecting spam. Hi, Madison. You don't know me, but I knew Serena before she became Mrs. Vaughn. We were roommates at NYU. She's not who she says she is. If you want the full story, meet me at the Café Nido on Fairfax. Noon tomorrow. Come alone. There was no signature, just a first name. Ray. Madison closed the laptop, her mind suddenly wide awake. She had assumed Serena was just another gold digger Julian picked up in a lounge somewhere. But something about the tone of the message felt personal, urgent. The next day, Madison arrived at Café Nido in oversized sunglasses and a grey cashmere coat. She spotted Ray instantly, a woman in her early 30s with honey-brown skin, dark curls pulled into a loose bun, and eyes that darted nervously around the patio. "You're Madison," Ray said, standing. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Madison took a seat across from her. "I wasn't sure either. Talk." Ray glanced around again, then leaned in. "Serena's real name is Rebecca Collins. She changed it legally in Nevada 4 years ago." Madison's brow lifted. "Why?" "Because she was involved in a high-profile embezzlement scandal, a tech startup in Boston. She wasn't charged, but she was definitely implicated. The founder was her boyfriend. She disappeared right before he was arrested." Madison blinked. "And now she's resurfaced, married to my husband." Ray nodded. "She's smart, dangerous. But more than that, she's calculated. She's not with Julian because she loves him. She's positioning herself for a payout." Madison sat back, letting the information sink in. "Why tell me this?" "Because I was the whistleblower in the Boston case. And when I saw her face in the tabloids last week, wearing your robe, drinking your champagne, I knew she was pulling the same con." Madison studied Ray for a long beat. She didn't know whether to trust her, but her gut told her this woman had no love for Serena, or Rebecca, or whoever she really was. "You have documentation?" Ray slid a thumb drive across the table. "Everything I could dig up." Madison took it without a word. As she stood to leave, Ray added, "One more thing. She doesn't care if she burns your life down. She's done it before." Back in her suite, Madison called her lawyer. "I need a full background check on Serena Vaughn." "Or Rebecca Collins. Cross-reference with Boston federal court records and tech sector fraud cases." She hung up and called Simone. "If that woman thinks she's going to inherit anything from Julian's lies, she's mistaken. I want every trust she's connected to under scrutiny, and any prenup between them. I want to see it." "You got it," Simone replied, already typing. Later that evening, Madison sat by her window, staring at the Los Angeles skyline, the lights twinkling like silent applause. She had spent years building a life with Julian, always in the background, the elegant, supportive wife, the brains behind the empire no one gave credit to. Now, she was stepping into the light. Julian thought he had married someone soft, someone too hurt to fight. He had no idea the woman he left behind had just become his biggest threat. And she wasn't just fighting back. She was planning to win. The moment Madison stepped off the elevator into the lobby of her attorney's office, she felt the shift in energy. Receptionists paused mid-sentence. Interns straightened in their chairs. Madison Vaughn wasn't just another high-profile client anymore. She was a woman on the warpath. Patricia Wynn, Madison's lead counsel and one of the most respected divorce attorneys in the state, was already waiting. "He doesn't know yet," Patricia said, escorting her into the conference room. "About the fraud filings, the court motion, or what you found on Serena." Madison set her bag down and peeled off her coat. "Good. Let's keep it that way." "I want him blindsided." Patricia handed over a thick folder. "We finished the forensic audit. Julian's been shifting assets through shell companies tied to Serena's fake identity." Ray wasn't exaggerating. Rebecca Collins was knee-deep in financial crimes before she reinvented herself. Madison flipped through the documents, her eyes narrowing. And Julian helped her move the money. He did, likely unknowingly at first. "But based on these emails," Patricia pointed to a page, "it's clear he knew by the time they married. He didn't care. Probably thought he could control the narrative. Madison looked up. Let's talk about the prenup. Patricia smirked. They don't have one. Signed nothing before the wedding. California's community property laws kick in by default. Madison laughed softly. So she really thinks she's going to take half of everything he has? She might, unless we act fast. I'm not interested in saving Julian from himself, Madison said. But if we expose her and prove they conspired to hide assets during our divorce, everything becomes leverage. Patricia nodded. And I already have a judge willing to issue a temporary freeze on all their jointly held assets pending investigation. Madison closed the folder, her decision clear. File it. Today. That afternoon, Julian returned home to find his driveway blocked by a black government SUV. His new wife, Rebecca, or Serena, as he still called her, stood barefoot on the porch in a robe, phone pressed to her ear. She turned to him as he stepped out of the car. Julian, we have a problem. Inside, 2 federal agents sat at the kitchen table, polite but firm. They explained calmly that the property was now under investigation for financial misconduct and asset concealment. Nothing would be seized, yet, but access would be monitored, and further movement of joint accounts could trigger criminal action. Julian paced the kitchen. This is nonsense. My divorce from Madison is finalized. She agreed to everything. She signed. One agent, a woman in her early 40s with an efficient bob and a voice like steel, met his glare without flinching. The issue isn't what she signed. It's what you failed to disclose when she signed it. Julian's fists clenched. Where did this come from? The agent stood. You'll need to speak to your attorney. We'll be in touch. The moment they left, Julian turned to Serena. What the hell did you do? She looked stunned. I didn't say anything. I swear, but if Madison found out about Boston, she has connections. She might have dug up my record. Julian stared at her, the reality dawning. You told me that case was closed, that your name was clean. I wasn't charged, Serena said defensively. And I told you I changed my name because of harassment. You believed me. Julian grabbed his phone. I need to talk to Max, my lawyer, but it was too late. As the sun set behind the Los Angeles skyline, every financial advisor on his payroll was already receiving notifications. Court orders, freezes, inquiries. Madison had detonated a bomb without even being in the room. At that exact moment, she was seated in a corner booth at the Lantern, a quiet upscale lounge in Brentwood, sipping an old-fashioned across from Elijah Monroe, a cybersecurity expert and former FBI consultant. Tell me about the cameras, Madison said. Elijah pulled up his tablet. Julian installed biometric systems at the Bel Air house last year. Facial recognition, retina scan, voice activation. But I found a back door. Madison leaned in. You can get me access? I already did. You want audio too? I want everything. Conversations, documents, plans. If they're trying to hide anything else, I need it. Elijah paused. There's something else. I found a mirror server. Hidden under a dummy IP in the Caymans. Someone, probably Serena, has been copying your old communications, emails, business contracts, photos, even personal messages. Madison's throat tightened. She's trying to blackmail me? Or build a case to discredit you. If you retaliate publicly, she'll drop it. Madison looked out at the city beyond the window. Let her try. She's underestimating the version of me she's dealing with now. That night, as Serena scrolled through the encrypted files she had secretly stored, a new alert flashed across her laptop. Access breach detected. IP Los Angeles. Trace initiated. She slammed the laptop shut and stared at the wall, her breath shallow. She had played this game before, against weaker women. Ones without power, without strategy, but Madison Vaughn was not one of them. And she was coming. The next morning, the headlines hit. Vaughn Empire faces federal probe, financial misconduct, shell companies, and missing millions. Madison Vaughn retaliates with class and strategy. Rebecca Collins, ex-wife exposes new bride's shady past. Julian woke up to his name trending for all the wrong reasons. By noon, 2 investors pulled out of Empire Row. 1 board member resigned. The family lawyer stopped answering his calls. Madison, meanwhile, walked into the office of one of her private equity partners, dropped a folder on the desk and said, "Here's proof that Julian diverted client funds. I need to re-enter the boardroom." Quietly. With majority control. The partner glanced at the documents, then at Madison. "You want the seat back?" "No," she said, calm and sure. "I want the throne." And in that moment, it was clear. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclamation. Her name. Her power. Her legacy. And Madison Vaughn wasn't just walking away. She was walking tall, with the world watching. Madison stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse suite, coffee untouched in her hand, watching the morning unfold across Los Angeles. The headlines were still hot. Every outlet had picked up the story. Julian Vaughn, once a golden boy of tech finance, now embroiled in a federal investigation. His new wife outed as a fraud with a trail of shell corporations and sealed court records. The internet buzzed with commentary, and though some voices cried billionaire drama, most were squarely on Madison's side. The doorbell rang. She didn't move. Jade, her assistant, answered. "He's here," she called softly. Madison took one last look at the skyline before turning. "Send him in." Julian stepped into the room like a man unraveling. His tailored navy suit was impeccable as always, but his eyes betrayed a sleepless night, and his jaw was locked with tension. "You didn't need to go this far," he said, skipping any greeting. Madison raised an eyebrow. "Didn't I? You tried to erase me from the empire I helped build." "That's a declaration of war." Julian shook his head. "This isn't war. It's humiliation. You've dragged my name through the press. You've made me look like a fool." "You made yourself look like a fool," she replied evenly. "When you forged settlement papers, siphoned funds into offshores, and married a woman with a felony past whose real name you didn't even know." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked smaller somehow, like the myth of Julian Vaughn was caving in under the weight of truth. "I came to make a deal," he said finally. Madison laughed once. "Now you want to negotiate. I'll resign. From Empire Row, I'll step away quietly. I'll even issue a public statement. Just drop the charges. End the asset freeze." "You think this is still about you?" she said, voice low. "Julian, I'm not interested in seeing you fall anymore. I'm interested in rebuilding what I created, without you." He took a step forward. "You can't erase me from this story." "I don't need to," she said. "You're erasing yourself just fine." She turned away from him and walked toward her desk. "But I'll offer you something." "You give up full controlling interest in Empire Row. You walk away without a vote, without a title, without a dime more than what I allow in the settlement. In exchange, I don't pursue criminal conspiracy charges against you and Serena. Take it or leave it." He stared at her like she'd just offered him his own funeral invitation. "You're bluffing." Madison opened a drawer and pulled out a copy of the email Serena had sent under her alias, directing the transfer of $18 million into a Cayman account, signed and time-stamped. "Am I?" His face went pale. "I want it in writing by tomorrow," she added, "or I go to the DA." He left without another word. Later that night, Serena called Madison. Madison didn't answer. A few minutes later, a video came through, a shaky clip of Serena, clearly emotional, pacing a room. "You think you won, Madison, but you don't know everything. You don't know what he promised me, what he told me about you. You're not the victim you pretend to be." Madison watched the clip silently, then forwarded it to Elijah with a single line, "Dig into this. See if she's bluffing." By the next morning, he had a response. "She's not bluffing, but she's also desperate. I found a hidden drive in her cloud backup, audio recordings of Julian. You need to hear this." The recording played. "I'm only marrying you so I can freeze Madison out. The board doesn't trust her anymore. With the right optics, I can spin this. Make her look unstable, overly emotional. She'll walk away quietly once she realizes the empire isn't hers anymore." Madison felt her stomach drop. She'd expected betrayal. She'd prepared for deceit. But hearing his voice, hearing the calculated cruelty of his plan, it burned deeper than she anticipated. Still, she composed herself and smiled, because now she had everything she needed. That evening, she sent the recording to the board of Empire Row, attached to a single sentence. "You deserve to know who you're working with." The fallout was instant. Board members texted her, investors called her directly. By the next day, a special vote was scheduled. Julian was removed. His stock was frozen. And his reputation, carefully constructed over a decade, collapsed in 48 hours. Meanwhile, Madison made her first public statement since the divorce. A live interview. "I didn't leave for revenge," she told the reporter. "I walked away to remind every woman watching that we don't need to beg for what we helped build. We take it. We protect it. And if someone tries to take it from us, we rise higher." The internet exploded. Within minutes, her clip had over 5 million views. The Vaughan clause started trending, a phrase describing the power move of reclaiming one's empire after betrayal. And Serena? She disappeared. No trace of her in Julian's penthouse, no mention on social media. The trust was dissolved. The funds frozen. Madison didn't care where she went, because she wasn't looking back anymore. Only forward, toward the empire she would now lead. On her terms. Her legacy, her name. The news of Julian's downfall had spread like wildfire. Media outlets scrambled to cover the sudden crash of a man once hailed as the prince of venture capital. But while the world was focused on him, Madison moved in silence, working methodically behind closed doors. She didn't celebrate. Not yet, because she knew the real work was only beginning. By midweek, she was already restructuring Empire Row from the inside. The executive team had been gutted, 3 resignations and 2 terminations, all within 48 hours of the board vote. Madison called for an emergency strategy summit at the company's headquarters in downtown LA. As she walked into the conference room, flanked by Elijah on her left and Diana, her new chief of staff, on her right, every eye turned to her. Some still carried remnants of doubt, others admiration, all of them attention. Madison didn't hesitate. "Let's be clear," she began, voice calm but firm. "This is not about fixing Julian's mess. This is about building something better. Something clean. Something sustainable. And if you're not here for that, walk out now." No one moved. She looked to the whiteboard behind her. Diana clicked the remote, revealing a slide labeled The Reclamation Initiative. This company was built on risk, on vision. But somewhere along the way, it became about manipulation, not innovation. That changes today. Madison outlined her plan: reinvestment in ethical startups, a restructured profit-sharing model that included junior staff, and a renewed commitment to diversity in leadership. From this point forward, she said, we measure success by legacy, not ego. It wasn't just a speech. It was a line in the sand. After the meeting, Diana leaned in and whispered, "That was bold." Madison nodded. It had to be. Later that evening, she met Elijah for dinner in a quiet Brentwood bistro. He slid a folder across the table. "You're not gonna like this," he said, eyes flicking up to meet hers. Madison opened it slowly. Inside were a series of financial transfers, obscure shell companies, fake names, all tied to one singular fund in Belize. At the center of it, her name. She looked up sharply. "What is this?" Elijah lowered his voice. "It's what Julian's been building for the last 6 months. A contingency plan. If everything collapsed, he planned to pin it on you." Her throat tightened. "Why didn't we catch this sooner?" "He buried it deep. The only reason we found it is because Serena's digital trail went cold. She's been scrubbing her identity, and in doing that, she exposed his backup play." Madison's mind raced. "Does the board know?" "Not yet. But they will if this hits the press before we get ahead of it." She leaned back, breathing slow. Julian hadn't just betrayed her in marriage. He'd prepped a full-scale character assassination. A woman like her, black, successful, wealthy, could be torn apart in seconds if the optics weren't airtight. "We need a kill switch," she said. "Something that not only clears me but exposes his insurance policy." Elijah nodded. "Already working on it." The next day, Madison made a rare move. She went to see Julian. Not at his penthouse, not at some high-rise office. She found him at a rented guest house in Bel Air, sitting beside the pool in a wrinkled t-shirt and old jeans, sipping whiskey at 10 in the morning. "You came to gloat?" he asked, not looking at her. "No," she said. "I came to give you a chance to end this clean." He laughed bitterly. "Clean is off the table, Madison. You made sure of that." She stepped closer. "I know about the Belize account. I know about the shell companies, and I know you were going to blame it all on me." Finally, he looked at her. His eyes were bloodshot, and for the first time, she saw fear. "You were always smarter," he murmured. "No," she said. "I was always more loyal." That was the difference. He put down his glass, rubbing his face. "You can ruin me." "You already ruined yourself," she replied. "But if you publicly admit to the offshore scheme and issue a formal statement clearing my name, I'll make sure the DA doesn't press criminal charges." He blinked, surprised. "Why would you give me that out?" "Because I'm not here to destroy you," she said. "I'm here to rebuild what you tried to take from me." Julian leaned back, silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll do it." 2 days later, a carefully worded public statement was released. Julian admitted to misleading the board, manipulating settlement agreements, and hiding funds offshore. Most importantly, he cleared Madison of any involvement. The headlines hit differently this time, not scandal, but redemption. Madison stood at the edge of her office balcony as the sun began to dip over Los Angeles. The sky was a blaze of amber and gold. Diana joined her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "To the Queen of Calm Destruction," Diana said with a smirk. Madison clinked her glass. "To never needing to do it again." As they sipped, Diana asked, "So what's next?" Madison smiled. Now I build for me. For the women watching, for the little girl I used to be, who thought she needed a man to have power. And as the city below glowed with light and noise and motion, Madison knew, for the first time in years, she was exactly where she was meant to be. At peace. In control. And finally, undeniably, free. Madison barely had time to breathe before the next storm hit. 2 weeks after Julian's public confession, just as the media buzz was finally starting to settle and investor confidence was returning, an anonymous whistleblower submitted a formal complaint to the SEC. The allegation: Empire Rose's IPO 5 years ago had been artificially inflated using aggressive valuation tactics, a strategy Julian had spearheaded and that could, on paper, implicate Madison as his then co-founder. It was a chess move. Calculated, precise, except this time the person pulling strings wasn't Julian. It was someone else entirely. As Madison sat in her office going over the filing with Elijah and the company's general counsel, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "This reeks of setup," she muttered, scanning the language of the complaint. "There's too much technical detail in here, too much that only an insider would know." Elijah nodded. Whoever wrote this had access to old board minutes, investor pitch decks, and a full financial archive. Could be someone who stayed behind when you left. Or someone who just joined to finish what Julian started, Diana added from across the table. Someone who wants to destroy you from the inside. Not just Julian's reputation. Yours. That thought hung in the air like smoke. Madison leaned back, fingers steepled. "Call an internal audit, quietly." "I want access logs to the archives, deleted file retrievals, old email chains. I want to know who touched what and when." The next day, while the investigation quietly unfolded in the background, she attended a closed-door meeting with Empire Rose remaining shareholders. The room was tense. Whispers of the new SEC complaint had already begun to circulate, and doubt was creeping in again. "I won't sugarcoat it," Madison said, standing before them. "This is serious, but I want to be clear. Empire Row will cooperate fully. We're transparent, and we have nothing to hide." A voice cut through from the back of the room, crisp, condescending. "Unless what you're hiding is yourself." Heads turned. The man who spoke stood slowly. He was tall, mid-40s, with a designer suit and a smirk that could slice glass. Andre Pearson. A new board member, recently appointed, former investment banker. And Madison had recently learned, one of Julian's old poker buddies. "What's your angle, Andre?" she asked, tone sharp but level. Andre stepped forward. "My angle is protecting shareholder value. The board has asked me to oversee a special internal review committee. Just a precaution, of course. Translation, he was here to dig." "You're not here to protect value," she said. "You're here to plant doubt, but that's fine. Because while you're doing your little review, I'll be launching the new initiative." Andre blinked. "What initiative?" Madison stepped to the screen behind her and clicked the remote. A slide appeared marked with 3 simple words. Echelon Equity Fund. "This," she announced, "is Empire Row's new division, funding startups owned by women of color. Fully vetted, fully transparent, fully funded." The room buzzed with surprise. "This is how we rebuild trust. Not with distractions, but with direction." After the meeting, she walked down the hallway with Elijah. "He's trying to provoke you," Elijah warned. "I know," Madison said, "but he underestimated one thing." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I'm not here to win his game. I'm here to change the game entirely." That night, just after midnight, Diana's message came through. We found it. Madison rushed to her laptop, her heart pounding. On the screen, login records tied to the internal complaint. The IP traced back to a private server located in Houston. Registered under a shell company. And the account holder? Serena Wallace. Julian's new wife, the woman who had disappeared. "Of course," Madison whispered. Serena wasn't just cleaning up Julian's past. She was rewriting her own future, and Madison was in her way. The next morning, Madison held a press conference. No dramatics, no fanfare, just facts. We have been informed of a new investigation tied to valuation practices from 5 years ago, she said. I welcome this review. I trust it will reveal what we already know, that Empire Row has evolved into a company of integrity, leadership, and impact. Then she paused. But I also want to address the malicious attempts to undermine that integrity. We have traced the origin of the anonymous complaint to an individual with a direct conflict of interest. Legal action is being prepared, and we will pursue full accountability. She didn't say Serena's name. But the press didn't need it. By evening, the speculation had already begun. Former mistress turned wife turned mole. The headlines wrote themselves. Behind the scenes, Serena's legal team went quiet. No denial. No confirmation, just silence. But the silence spoke volumes. Later that week, Madison met with Victoria Hill, founder of one of the most powerful investment firms in Silicon Valley. Victoria had been watching the events unfold with interest, and now she had an offer. Come run Echelon under my umbrella, Victoria said. We'll give you access to global capital, full autonomy. You'd be building something that doesn't just shake the tree, it plants a new one. Madison didn't answer right away. She walked through the city that evening, past buildings she had helped fund, ideas she had helped grow, wondering if it was time to let Empire Row go completely. Could she walk away now that she had cleared her name? Was that the most powerful move? She thought of her younger self, the girl who believed success meant staying at the table, even when it burned her. Now she knew better. Real power wasn't clinging to what once was. It was choosing when to walk away. Not broken, but smiling. Madison stood in the elevator of the Pacific Equity Building, 22nd floor button glowing, her reflection fractured in the mirrored doors. She wasn't nervous. This wasn't that kind of meeting. She was ready. Tired, maybe, but sharp. Sharper than she had been in years. Victoria Hill had given her 3 days to consider the offer. Madison had taken 2. The night before, she sat up rereading her journals, old sketches, roadmaps, raw thoughts from a younger version of herself who wanted something bigger than legacy wealth. Something disruptive, something good. And this meeting today was her answer. When the doors opened, Victoria was already standing in the glass-walled conference room, flanked by 2 associates. She greeted Madison with a half smile and a firm handshake. Let's get straight to it, Victoria said. You've built something powerful with Empire Row, but what you're trying to do with Echelon, it's bigger. I want you leading it without the baggage. Clean break? Madison asked, lowering herself into a leather chair. Exactly. We'll acquire Echelon as a separate entity. You'll run it as CEO. I'll back you, but you'll make the calls. And Empire Row? You walk away. They keep their name. You keep your vision. It was the kind of deal most people would beg for. Madison didn't speak for a moment. Then finally, let me tell you what I want. Victoria raised a brow, intrigued. I want full creative and operational control. I want Echelon's board to be 70% women and minorities. Real representation. I want to bring my team, Diana, Elijah. All of them. And I want 10% of your equity, she added calmly. Not just as payment, as leverage. Because if I'm going to walk away from the company I built, I want something that makes them feel it. There was a pause. Then Victoria laughed. Damn. I was right about you. You were, Madison said. So is that a yes? It's a hell yes. That night, Madison met with Elijah and Diana at her apartment. She didn't sugarcoat anything. I'm leaving Empire Row, she said plainly. We're spinning off Echelon. Victoria's backing it. You two are coming with me. Neither of them spoke for a long second. Then Diana grinned. Took you long enough. Elijah exhaled deeply, then laughed. What do you need from us? I need loyalty, Madison said. More than ever. We're not just building a fund. We're building a damn platform for voices like ours, for girls in cities like the one I came from. And we're going to do it our way. Then let's burn the blueprint, Elijah said, and start over. The next day, Madison handed in her resignation to Empire Row. Andre tried to spin it. This is a reaction, he said at the emergency board meeting. She's panicking over the complaint. No, Madison replied. This is the most strategic thing I've ever done. You're abandoning ship. I'm building a better one. The room shifted. Some of the board looked relieved, some ashamed, some, like Andre, just angry that she didn't leave in defeat. She walked out of the boardroom with her head high, her smile sharp as glass. The headlines were brutal. Billionaire founder steps down amid legal chaos. Madison Carter cashes out. But the articles didn't know the truth. They didn't know about the quiet purchase of the Echelon name, or the VC money already lining up, or the pipeline of underrepresented founders Madison had been mentoring under the radar for 2 years. Or the surprise waiting for Serena and Julian, because Madison wasn't done yet. She waited until Friday afternoon to release the announcement. A single press release, direct to inboxes across the valley. Madison Carter, founder of Empire Row, announces the launch of Echelon Equity, a $250 million fund supporting women of color in tech, backed by Hill Capital and a coalition of global partners. Launch date, 1 week. The response was volcanic. Within 2 hours, every major news outlet picked it up. TechCrunch, Forbes, Black Enterprise. Social feeds exploded. Messages poured in. DMs from women across the country. Founders, engineers, girls in STEM programs, thanking her, asking how they could help. Telling her she gave them hope. Julian, for his part, posted a photo with Serena from a luxury suite in Monaco. Caption, focused on love and freedom. But 2 days later, word got out that Serena had been removed from Neuropath's board. The SEC had dropped the complaint. The internal logs Madison's team had uncovered were now evidence in a civil suit, and Andre quietly exited the board the next month. Madison didn't celebrate. Not publicly. But that night, she opened a bottle of Syrah with Diana and Elijah on the rooftop of her new office building, 10 floors above the chaos, the bitterness, the fear. And as the city stretched out before them, glowing, she finally exhaled. This wasn't revenge. It was relief, redemption, and above all, renewal. She had cashed out, yes, but not to escape. She had cashed out to invest, in herself, in others, in the future. And that smile, it wasn't about what she left behind. It was about everything she was about to build. 6 months later, Echelon Equity was not just alive, it was thriving. Madison Carter sat at the head of a long conference table in a converted warehouse office in downtown Oakland, surrounded by the voices she'd once only dreamed of bringing together. Founders of all shades, ages, and backgrounds were pitching products, building tech, rewriting futures. The kind of room she had rarely been in when building Empire Row. Now, she had built it from scratch. Today was demo day, and the room buzzed with energy. Madison watched as a young founder from Chicago presented a mental health platform tailored to Black and Latina teens. Across the room, venture partners scribbled notes. A few eyes flicked to Madison for her reactions. She stayed stone-faced. Investors watched her just as closely now as they did the numbers. At the break, Diana stepped in with her iPad and a tight expression. "You're going to want to see this," she said, flipping the screen toward Madison. A headline glared back at her. Serena Ford's company files for bankruptcy amid scandal fallout. Madison's lips parted slightly. Already? They overexpanded, Diana said. Too fast. Too loud. Not enough substance. They lost 2 major contracts. Neuropath dropped them last week. Madison sat back, her gaze drifting to the high windows. Sunlight filtered through old steel frames. It was a beautiful afternoon in a space she now called her own. I thought she'd ride it longer, Madison murmured. She would have, Elijah said, joining them, if she hadn't built it on quicksand. They were quiet for a beat. You want to release a statement? Diana asked. Madison shook her head. No need to dance on ashes. But there was something else. A letter in her inbox that had sat unopened for 3 days. From Julian. She had avoided it, fearing it might trigger something she had already buried. But now, in this moment of closure, she opened it. Madison, I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for what I did. For what I didn't see. For how I let other people's dreams replace our shared one. I lost myself chasing the idea of freedom, only to find I'd been free all along, and I threw it away. I see you now, in the headlines, in the impact, and I remember who you were when we started. That version of us. I hope you know you built more than a company. You built me, and I'm sorry I broke that. You deserved better. Julian Madison read it once, then twice. She didn't cry. She didn't respond. Instead, she forwarded it to her personal archive labeled Closure and returned to the presentation room. That afternoon, she stood before the crowd, investors, press, mentees, community leaders, and delivered her closing speech. The same way she had done years ago when Empire Row first launched. But this time, her voice didn't shake. When I started Echelon, I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't looking to be the loudest voice in the room. I was looking to make space for people like me, for people who've never seen themselves reflected in boardrooms or balance sheets. I've walked away from a lot in the past year, but I've gained more than I ever thought possible. Power doesn't always look like what they tell you. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's rebuilding from the ground up. Sometimes it's smiling when they think they've broken you. And sometimes it's walking away with your pockets full, your head high, and your soul still intact. That's what we're building here. Not just businesses, not just exits, but legacies. And to every woman who's been underestimated, overlooked, or overwritten, I see you. I was you. And now I'm here for you. The applause rose like a wave. Some stood, some cheered. But Madison, she just smiled, soft, real, and full of fire. Later that night, she sat alone on the rooftop, the bay lights stretching out in every direction, a glass of red wine in hand, music playing softly on her phone. Diana had stayed late to clean up. Elijah was flying out early for a conference, but Madison wasn't alone. She had herself, her name, her future. And in the quiet, she whispered it once, just for herself. I won. Not because she'd hurt anyone, but because she didn't let anyone destroy her. She cashed out, she walked away, she built her own empire. And she never looked back. If you loved this story and believe in the power of rebuilding, of rising stronger from betrayal, of turning pain into purpose, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and share your thoughts below. This is where stories like Madison's find their voice. And maybe, just maybe yours too.